Sound of abundance. Sound of abundance.
Hello everyone. Hi from the world of place. This is Kabzeel and this is our engagement, monthly engagement now, TCL. Welcome to another session of it. We have had other several sessions and we hope you will catch up on them. You will engage, subscribe, like and comment. And this today we're starting another session and it's going to be a series and it's tagged principles of the world place and we'll have different subtopics under that, but today we're looking at practical steps to walking in abundance in this season or simply walking in abundance, and this was born out of a prayer and a cry in my heart for how do we as a people position ourselves in this season. In our local economy in Nigeria here, the news that have been eating the headlines for the past couple of months have been inflation, the economy, from the new regime to a lot of currency devaluation that has impacted directly on people's socio-economic power. Now, because of that, we decided, or I decided to, okay, how should we as Kabzeelites position ourselves? And if this is your first time of joining this channel, we are a faith-based center. So we're a kingdom community wealth center. We're kingdom because we're about the king. We're a community because we're made up of friends and family of friends and family. So back to our topic today, practical steps to walking in abundance this season. And that is a subtopic under principles of the world place. So I got 7 steps, and that's what we're going to be sharing today. 7 steps. We may not get into everything. We may look at the first 3 or the first 4, or we'll point on some of them and we'll build up on that as we proceed. I got 7 answers to how we can navigate this season. Number 1, do not worry. Say with me, do not worry. Be thankful. There's a popular, is it a slogan? Don't worry, be happy. But I would like to update that. Don't worry, be thankful. Okay. Number 2, shift your focus. Number 3, ask the 3 key questions. And then number 4, identify and speak to your sources and sinks. Identify, speak to your sources and sinks. Number 5, think global, live local. Number 6, think sustainability. And number 7, last but not the least, is never stop learning. All right. In fact, if you just take the first and the last and you look at it, you will find solutions with which you can run with. Do not worry, be thankful. It changes your posture, and then never stop learning. It gives you opportunity to earn because you learn before you earn. All right. Now let's look at it in details. Number 1 is do not worry. Don't worry, be thankful. It is important, and like I said, part of our core here is our faith driven. So we believe in the supernatural coming upon the natural, the super on the natural, the extra on the ordinary. And there's a scripture that, there's a popular scripture that says, how many of you can by worry add a cubit, which is 1.5 feet, to your stature? So worry does not do anything positive to you because by worrying, it doesn't change. I checked the rate of the naira to the dollar today, and I was surprised to find that yesterday it was 1,100, today it is 1,140, and I'm like, okay, this is serious. And you see, the reason I'm not so bothered anymore is because of a story. I'll tell you a story. In 2014, I was unmarried, about to get married, and I remember walking down the street of my area, and it was in the news that day that the federal government under President Goodluck Jonathan was going to devalue the naira from about 160, 150, 160 to 200 naira. I felt terrible. Imagine me, I was walking right beside the express, lost in thought, and right there God spoke to my heart that take your heart off it, man. It's going to get worse. Imagine, I mentioned this a few years ago. Imagine, I never knew we could get as bad as 435. And that's what happened in July 2020. We never knew we could cross 750. That's what happened in 2022. We never knew we could cross 1,000. That's what has happened in 2023. But now, getting my heart off it, I've instead positioned. So what you need to do is to note this scripture. Don't worry. It's, scripture says in Philippians 4:16 to 7, 6 to 7, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be known to God. So if you see a terrible happening or something happening, for instance, the war in Gaza right now, rather than worry, flip that with thanksgiving. So another version says, let your specific request come with thanksgiving. So if you've listened to the sharing we did on the power of the blessing, where we talked about giving thanks, what giving thanks does is that it releases the blessing over what you are doing. It changes your perspective. And you know, there is a scientific research that has put that anyone that committed suicide was not thankful. No one that is sincerely thankful commits suicide, because it releases hormones that changes our outlook scientifically. And this is scripture, that be anxious for nothing, but mentioning your specific request, do not worry, be thankful. So over the situation, the naira seems to be falling, be thankful. As you're thankful, your posture will begin to change. All right. So let's note that that's the first, and that is very key. Now, moving on, the second, like it, is shift your focus. Shift your focus. Remember, when you begin to worry, look at it from do not worry, be thankful. When you begin to worry, you are looking at the problem. When you are being thankful, you are looking at God. So when you shift your focus, you're moving it from worry to shifting to a supreme eternal being who is able to shift situation. So two things you need to shift your focus from the storm, the object of worry, to the Lord, from the world to the word. So as you shift your focus, what happens is that you begin to see opportunities within the storm. You begin to see opportunities to walk on water within the storm. You begin to see opportunities to rise above the influence of the world based on the word, because there are people that have gone through several famines in scripture, from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Joseph. They all had famines in their time, and it was by the ability to shift from what was happening to see what is not happening, what God is saying, and which is the next point, they were able to get solutions. For Abraham, he was able to dig well, and that's where we find about irrigation. That's the first time we see irrigation in scripture, because he came to a realization that if rain does not fall from above, water can be dug from beneath. So shift your focus. Remember, Peter, he only began to sink when his focus shifted from the Lord to the storm. So as you keep your focus on the Lord, in the midst of that, you would be asking, one thing you should be asking is, where is Jesus in your storm? Where is Jesus in your storm? One, is he walking on water, or is he sleeping? Every time Jesus experienced a storm, his response was in the opposite to natural reaction. And that's because he knew something, he knew someone, he was someone, and he was able to do something about it. So if you're able to find where Jesus is in the storm, and like Bill Johnson says, the storm you can sleep in is a storm you can have authority over. You come to that place where you take your worries, you are thankful in the midst of that storm, you begin to see the winds are winds of change, an opportunity in it. And sometimes God does not calm the storm, it calms you and enables you to grow through it. Like the eagle, you rise above it. So shift your focus. Do not be concerned about the valuation alone. Look to God. What are the opportunities in the midst of this crisis right now? Imagine a teacher. I remember having a conversation with a teacher, and when he was talking, and his salary right now is somewhere, not to mention exact figures, but it's somewhere very low, right? But we now mention that there's also an opportunity to right now begin to offer your service to people abroad where they pay you in foreign currency. And when that comes in, you are able to earn more. So what seems to be a devaluation can actually be to your advantage when you're earning in foreign currency. So there is always a way out. Shift your focus. All right, because of our time, let's move to the next one, which is ask 3 questions. And this was developed by an American general in the midst of their war in the 18th century. And they noticed that not only was it very victorious, but in between, during the different periods, he had there were times where he just couldn't find the general on the forefront, and he always went back to his tent, as it were. And they were asking him, "What did you do? Why would you always retreat before the final push, the final victory?" And he said he always went to his tent to clear his head and then to ask three questions. Number one, what is happening? Number two, what is not happening? Number three, what can I do about what is happening? And that's what you need to do. What is happening? Right now, yeah, the dollar and the naira, naira is falling, right? But your life is not falling. Your economy is not inched to the dollar. Yeah, you may import things, a lot of things, inflation may be rising, but your life is not experiencing that inflation. So yes, that is happening, that is not happening to you. What is the current state of your finances? For some people, you may just have earned a salary increase. For some people, yeah, your salary may not be able to purchase, what the purchasing power may have reduced, right? But what is happening? What is not happening? You most likely do not have a dollar crisis unless you're in Gaza Strip. You most likely do not have bombs landing on your head. So you need to understand your own location and where you are in the grand scheme of things, and not to criticize or look down on people that are going through that. I mean, if you are in the Gaza Strip, that is literally your position. So if you're in the Gaza Strip, you're not likely thinking about dollar and your local currency. You're thinking about safety and survival first. So because that is what is happening within you. But right now, you need to look at, okay, what can I then? Where is my own location, and what can I do? Three things you can do: think differently. And to think differently, you must think differently. And after thinking differently, you can speak differently. You can begin to confess a lifting up, because when men begin to say there is a casting down, you can say there is a lifting up. I literally was joking with someone earlier today on a call, and I greeted him and I said, "Ah, my guy at the top." And he responded to me that, "No, you are your guy at the top, or I'm your boy at the bottom." And I tried to tell him, "No, don't speak like that." And he said, "No, he's trying to be a realist." But you see, scripture, what you speak begins to form the world around you, because words create world. Speak increase, speak positive. And you don't just speak positive based on empty words, you speak it from a place of prayer and thankfulness. Remember, asking the three questions, and finally, try to attract better value. All right, those are things you can begin to do within yourself. You can change your posture, your position, your outlook to life, and begin to put yourself in a place where you can attract better value. Like the example of the teacher I mentioned, do not look at what you're earning as a little, but look at adding another layer. You're already fruitful, multiply. Put yourself out on platforms that are available. Make it for free first. And then as you grow that on maybe YouTube, Instagram, you can then begin to monetize it and then funnel that down. You can create, for instance, and you know the funny thing, it teaches math. Math is one of the most difficult subjects. And if you're able to teach that in a way that children can relate, the world will beat a path to your door. You just need to attract different value. And I believe we ended up that conversation with him having to create a business pitch and a model from it. So that is an opportunity for him to earn. All right, moving on. And we may have to pause here because I don't want this to be more than maybe 15, 20 minutes at the max. Is to identify and speak to your sources and sinks. Now, use the word sources. Sources are means with which you get inflows, and sinks at which outlets for outflows, as it were. So I will talk about this in terms of monetary value. Sources are where you get your source of income, and then sinks are expenses. So you see, sources as income, sinks as expenses. Now, for most people, for instance, example of the teacher that I've been making, he has one source, and that's one source, many things. Things, rent, transportation, feeding, a lot of that. When you have that, what that does is that it creates source dependency. You are attached to that one source. If anything shakes in that source, you immediately begin to catch a cold. Automatically, your systems are arranged. Our conversation that day was to move him to a point where he could now begin to create multiple sources. Now, there are different scenarios with sources and sinks. I'll give you some, maybe 4 or 5 of them. Number one, if you have your source less than your sink, what will happen is that your system will dry up. Now, sources and sinks are two components of a financial system. So if your source are less than your sinks, the system will dry up. If your source is equal to your sink, what you will find is that there's a lot of flow, traction, but nothing is retained. And that happened to a lot of civil servants in our father's generations. They had money, got money for cooperative, they did a lot of things. But the moment they, I wanted to say graduated, not graduated, they retired, that was it. They became dependent pensioners because it was just a flow, and the flow was equal to the sink. And when the flow increased, I mean, when the source increased, the sink also increased to it, increased to it. So they maintained a level. They seemed to be progressing with that level, but the moment the source stopped, this didn't stop, and immediately it became a problem. All right. The third one is that the source is greater than the sink. What happens is that you begin to enter a system of overflow. And if you're not careful with overflow, if overflow is not properly managed, it can be wasted. And that's where you begin to talk about having investment, having storehouses, and then there are cases where you have source only, no sink. It's rare, right? But in that kind of case, what happens is that source alone, the system dies because it becomes like a dead sea. Any system that does not give out will die. So it is important to have both for a healthy system. Just like you eat, you must defecate, you must excrete, because there must be a movement. Now, if you have no source, you have only sink, you don't have a system. You're simply a dependent person. So it is important to look at your source, look at your sink. Now, the reason for this is identify your source and sinks. Now begin to speak to them. In Yoruba, there's something they call agbano. Please try and interpret it. Drop a comment, tell me what is the literal interpretation of agbano. For me, it sounds more like collect, something that collects to spend, but literally it's a system or a something that essentially ensures that you keep spending with nothing to show for it. So, for instance, it could be a chronic health disease. For instance, it could be a bad gambling habit that you just keep spending out, a drinking habit, an addiction of something. That's what we call agbano. You've learned a new word, right? Okay, if you've not learned, give me your interpretation for that word. All right. Now, the key point is to identify your sources and your sinks. Now begin to speak to the source. Release the blessing over it. If you've not seen the power of the blessing, I encourage you, please go do so. Release the blessing over it, that this will grow. It will not dry. It will continue to increase. And then release the blessing over the sinks, that the sinks will be healthy. There are good sinks, there are bad sinks. Now, good sinks are investments. Investment in real estate, investment in landed properties, which is also real estate, investment in agriculture, in projects and companies, investment in your health, investment in exercise, investment in good food, quality food. Those are good education, those are good things. But there are also bad things, and I know we just mentioned examples of them. So you need to have a good balance of that between your sources and your sinks. And as I begin to want to pause, like I said, I don't want it to get too long, is for your sources, begin to look for ways to create new sources. And I look at examples of wells. We must all be well builders. Say that with me. I must be a well builder. And I must be a generational well builder. And when you say wells, we are more familiar with bowls in our days. But in scripture times or in Bible times, it was wells. Wells are something you gather around, you need water to wet the floor. You begin to dig on a point, You go through days of turmoil, the well collapses, you continue again. Sometimes they lose a man, sometimes they go ahead, and then they come to a place where they touch muddy water. They continue until they get to rock, they break through, they find a spring until they get to the aquifer, and then they have water, and then they create a drawing mechanism, and that water can sustain them for generations. Imagine the well of Jacob. It's still operational till today. So examples of generational wells are things like businesses that you can create for your generation. You can live for a generation. No one ever handed over a job to his child. You cannot retire as a professor and say your child should now become a professor because you spent 50 years at that your professorship. It's not possible. But you can create a job and create a business, rather, a corporation, and release that to generations. But that's not our focus for today. When I encourage us to be well builders, I'm encouraging us to be a different kind of well builders. You see, businesses can end, but the blessing can be transferred. Now, what the patriarchs released is the blessing. Now, if you see from Genesis 25, verse 5 and 6, Isaac, Abraham gave unto the other children, he gave them gifts, which are examples of businesses. But unto Isaac, he gave the blessing, he gave all. Now, what I'm encouraging for all of us is that in our day, we should go and find out and journal our portals, our experiences. Those are generational wealth. Our children should be able to create wealth sustainably. They should understand the principles. When we come to principles of the wealthy place and begin to look at things like savings, things like investment, our children should not have to read Rich Dad Poor Dad. They should not have to read The Richest Man in Babylon. They should not have to learn about money from outside. We must have taught them and translated God's principles into things that can be transferred to them. We must teach them how to relate with the cosmos, how to relate with the prince of the air, how to overcome, how to bring heaven on earth, how to be able to sustain a godly prayer life, how to be able to hear, how to be able to speak to sources, how to be able to attract value. And these are generational wealth. So I'm not just asking us to document and release a business. For instance, we have our project P&T, or we want to leave our oil palm to our children. No, that's 30 years. At best, we replant, right? No, that's not what I'm asking to you. I'm asking, how do we find the land? The land came by an operation of the blessing, by operation of the breaker. How did we get there? Can we put that into a package? Remember, we have scripture, because scripture is an eternal well that is available to any man that will seek. And the things that we get from scripture, we must release. Remember, scripture says concerning Abraham, that Abraham, in Hebrews 11, that Abraham dwelt with tent with Isaac and Jacob, with his son and his grandson, heirs with him of the same promise. He was not interested in just passing the title deed of the land. He was interested in passing the total knowledge of God and how to come into the title deed of the land. So what I'm encouraging us today is that be well builders. But the different kind of well is, how do you learn? How can you speak to the earth to release new dimensions of wealth? Because money can change from gold to paper to crypto. Who knows what it will change to in AI days? But the principles behind it, the eternal principles, once packaged, can be released for generations, so that Isaac will not need to be redigging. He will not need to dig new wells when the wells of his fathers are available for him. And that is my encouragement to us today. Remember, we have only been able to share 4 out of the 7. Do not worry, but be thankful. Shift your focus from the storm to the Lord, and then ask the 3 questions. What is happening? What is not happening? What can I do about what is happening? Then the 4th one, identify your sources. Begin to speak to them, and that your sources will continue to grow. They will create more sources, and then speak to your sources and things. And with that, we'll come to a pause for this. We'll probably continue the rest, which is think global, live local, think sustainability, never stop learning. But with this 4, I hope you've truly been blessed. I'll just release a word. And I say, Father, as our people go back and they begin to learn about their sources, they begin to shift and begin to thank that, Lord, you will open the floodgates, that you will break the limitation over their idea, over their businesses, and whatever it is that you have before the Lord as a business, spread it out and begin to thank. Remember, in Isaiah, it says, single barren. You that have not born, begin to break forth into singing. So I encourage you, break forth in this season to singing and dancing over your bread, which is your source of income, and you will see that God will break the limitation. Every time you break it, it will multiply. Every time you break it, it will add another layer. And I bless you. So thank you so much for joining us. And remember, like, subscribe, drop your comments. I'm waiting for the interpretations of Agbano. And I will see you as you continue to flourish in the world of place. Do have a wonderful day. God bless you.